Hey guys, Tarke here, and for today's video we're going to plan out my next build, which is going to be a lightning trap tornado trapper. I haven't seen that many people mess around with tornado all that much. I had a look on PvE Ninja and I saw one person using tornado with lightning trap, and it just seems like a pretty interesting setup. So basically, tornado was a new skill that came out of this league. You set this tornado out and you can charge up with projectiles. I originally wanted to do tornado plus cremation since that seemed very strong, but unfortunately that interaction doesn't work due to the way the cremation targets. But lightning trap shoots out a lot of projectiles, would very quickly charge up the tornado, and it just kind of seems like a bit of a fun vibe. So that's what we're going to plan out today. Now, before we get into all of that, our goals are to run 3 auras, a Skitterbot's Grace and Wrath, so we know that we're going to need to get some mana reservation to fit that all in. We'll work out what links we'd want to use for the lightning trap later, and then we'll work out our other utility links, but I guess I know that I would also want to run a tornado. We don't really care about scaling the tornado damage itself. We just care about the reflect damage taken to enemies portion, so we don't really need to shove DPS links into the tornado. We could if we wanted to, just to get a little bit of extra supplemental damage, but I'm more likely to rather just run like utility links, so be stuff like tornado, trap, advanced traps, because that gives a bunch of trap throwing speed and some skill effect duration, and then either like just increased duration so I don't need to throw it out as often, or something kind of like a cull. How long is this, the base secondary duration? 4 seconds, how long it stays alive for? Maybe you don't need the increased duration. Maybe you could run a brain. You could run a cull. Alternatively, if you got a pair of gloves which gave either trap or advanced traps, we could shove our bear trap in there as well, because you would want to run bear trap with advanced traps and increased duration. So let's assume that we have some kind of setup, a random falling somewhere on a shaper item, and we're getting either the trap or advanced traps through the item, and then we kind of have these together in like gloves or something, right? And then anything else after that point would be kind of just stuff like, you know, flame dash, links to an arcane surge, level 8 or something, steel skin, or a guard skill. You get the idea, but that's kind of like the main setup. So, I'm probably not going to use any lightning spire trap. We're probably just going to use a lightning trap plus tornado trap plus bear trap. So we don't need chain reaction, since we don't want to. We don't really have the tornado, I guess, scales off AoE, but we don't really have anything scaling off AoE. So for our ascendancies, we'd go for explosive expert. We will chill any enemies naturally through the skitterbots. We shock through skitterbots. We can also shock through our own damage very easily. To get the burn, there's a few ways of going about it. We could either just get like +1 flat fire damage anywhere to spells on our gear, so that when we crit, we burn. Alternatively, we could put Infernal Legion on our skitterbots so they burn nearby enemies, but that's extra mana reservation stuff. So I'm most likely just going to want to not run any focus on our lightning trap, and instead just have 1 flat fire damage somewhere. Okay, I'm probably going to build around Ghost Dance, so we have the option of rooting either through the evasion or the damage. Alternatively, we could root up and around the top to save some skill points. For now, let's just say we go through the damage, but it might actually be better to go through the evasion ES. I don't plan on going too hybrid-y with this tree, so probably not as much of a focus. You can skip Saboteur. I quite like it. For 2 points, you're getting 4% trap throwing speed, and you're getting 30 trap damage. Having additional traps placed at times is kind of nice, although it's sort of deceptive as a stat, because if you can only throw, for example, 3 traps at once, and your traps are hopefully triggering, then the place 2 additional only really adds damage when you're pre-laying on bosses. So it's a very niche, one time in a fight kind of situation where it's adding damage. The time when that's not true is if you have a lot of sources of chance to throw additional traps. So if you were stacking like cluster trap plus swift assembly, there's a new master which has 5% chance to throw 4 additional traps, and you can get that on gloves as well. That maybe like you throw 10 traps at a time, in which case, yeah, you want to stack that up as high as possible. A lot of people skip Expedious Munitions. I really like it. It's one of the biggest sources of trap throwing speed on the tree. Also gives a whole bunch of trap trigger AoE, and we're not planning on taking chain reaction. First mastery, pretty disappointed by the trap masteries, to be honest, but the most important one is the Skitterbot's mana reservation, giving us 12% mana reserved. Very nice. Skaboop. I quite like Leaf Shade, again, not something that many people are taking. Also worth keeping in mind, we already get immunity to Ignite and Shocked, just from being a Saboteur. We'll plan to pick up Freeze and Chill immunity either through gearing or through Pantheons. That does leave us exposed to Scorched Brittle Saps, which we don't have a good way of removing. Poison you can ignore through having high Chaos Res. I cap out Chaos Res on my characters. Bleed is something you just want to remove whenever, so it doesn't really matter the increase in duration on it. It's really just these Scorched Brittle Saps, but that's, again, fairly niche. Only really shows up in stuff like Simulacrums, so I don't feel too bad about taking that. But the 50% less damage taken over time is really strong when it comes to bossing, because a lot of bosses have very scary dots, but it's a situation of kind of like you get clipped by a beam, and this damage reduction gives you the chance to get out of the beam without taking too much damage. We're going to want to get 100% spell suppression. I don't know necessarily if we can take these nodes. We might come back to those later. Definitely taking Written Blood. Is there anything we want to anoint in here? No, not really. We're not using a cooldown trap, so we don't need Hasty Reconstruction. We do want Doomcast, though. A lot of these are strong, but I think the only one I'm really interested in is the reduced extra damage from critical strikes. So increased effective non-damaging ailments is very, very good. So that would increase our shock. I think we can probably get good enough shocks without it, but otherwise that would be the one we plug in. The 25 crit multi against unique enemies is very strong. You only really need damage against bosses, so it's basically just 25 crit multi for 1 point. So that is very, very good. Stuns I don't really care about. +3 level of crit support gems, not active gems. Yeah, it can be decent if we plan on running increased crit strikes, increased crit damage, inspiration, and stuff like that, but I'm not sure if I will. 150% increased chance to crit against enemies on full life. With traps, we're throwing multiple traps at once. This only helps on the first hit, and we can get our crit chance up very easily. So really the only ones I'm interested in are maybe the 50% ailment, maybe the 25 multi, but I kind of like the defense of this. I tend to play slightly defensively, but you could go for the DPS option if you want to. Pick up Ghost Dance, route around this way since you want all the nice crit multi, get all that nice trap trigger AoE, and 10% chance of traps trigger additional time is fine. We're probably going to end up picking up both the power charges and the frenzy charges, since we get power charge generation through here and we get frenzy charge generation on the tree, but we can also use charge traps. Let's just come across first because we know we're going to come this way. Pick up all of this, get all that nice evasion, get all that nice life. We were also doing the masteries as we go. The flat 50 life is very strong, scales up with all our percent, really, really good. We know that we want to get the Grace Mana Reservation because we want all that nice juicy mana reservation. Taking Master Sapper. If anything, you could really skip this. If you run charge traps, you don't have to take Master Sapper, but still gives you a little bit more trap throwing speed. Trap throwing speed is really good. A little bit more additional trap taste at a time, which again isn't the best stat, but it's actually pretty decent. And is there additional mastery you want in here? I also realized that I skipped over this mastery. So yeah, the 5% chance to throw up to 4 additional is fine. It's kind of whatever. Up to 5 additional traps. I've explained why in theory it's good, but it's actually like not as insane as it seems. The recover 30 life, I wish that it was just a little bit higher, at like 50 plus. I probably would take it. Traps can be damage doesn't matter because traps are immune to damage while they're in the air, so you don't actually need to worry about that. They can only be damaged if they're just laying around on the floor not doing anything, and your trap shouldn't be laying around on the floor not doing anything. Honestly, if I was to take any of these, I would just take the extra trap trigger AoE. Just to guarantee, since we're not taking chain reaction, that our traps are definitely triggering every single time. And I probably wouldn't even bother with any of the other trap masteries, to be honest. If we were really desperate, we could pick this up for a little bit of extra damage. Come out, grab Charisma, and grab the Mana Reservation. We now have 50% mana unreserved with Skitterbot's Grace Wrath, which gives us enough that we can manage our mana costs, alright. And if we end up getting blood magic gloves or whatever, it then gives us the available mana that we could fit in like a banner or something. We're playing lightning trap, so we want pierce. So for 3 points, we get 3 pierce. Pretty solid. The projectile masteries, none of them are that insane, but knockback, if you get a crit, actually seems kind of strong. We should throw out loads and loads of projectiles. I kind of like the idea of it. We could always drop it if we don't like it, but I think I would kind of like to experiment with that as sort of a pseudo defensive layer. Could maybe have an issue of us knocking enemies too far away from our tornadoes. We just have to see. But for now, let's just try it out. Get all that nice spell suppression, and debilitate is super strong. Debilitate reduces enemy damage, reduces their movement speed. What you want if you're taking lots of scary spell damage. Very, very good. Survivalist is pretty solid. We can actually get stun immunity pretty easily on this build by changing the tree a little bit. But if we don't take that rooting, then Survivalist gives us the option of can't be stunned if you haven't been hit recently. Pretty good. Also gives us the option of just getting a whole bunch more evasion from our body armor, since we'll be running a pure evasion body armor. But yeah, don't know for now. We could go for one of these masteries, some more damage. So for example, either the crit multi or the non-damaging ailments. Would be tempted to go for that. Is there anything else we want in here? You could go for the 10% increase maximum life. The reduced life recovery rate doesn't feel great. I'm not the biggest fan of that, but it isn't the worst. So if you're really desperate for life, you could throw that in there. Vitality reservation. If you want to run the vitality, I guess it's fine. Nothing else in there I'm not interested in. Right, so at this point you've got a couple of different options. We're going to come down here. We get, for 2 points, we get 30 dex, which is fine. We need high dex to wear high evasion gear. We get some prod speed, which is nice. We get some projectile damage, which is nice. Get access to some more life. Also gives access to chance to avoid being stunned. So with these points, we could now change the tree slightly and come across this way and grab, boom, and we are now stun immune. We grab melding, and that's one way of doing the tree. Also, sorry, I would want to pick up resourcefulness. So yeah, that's one way of doing the tree. Ups the points a little bit. Still haven't got the most life, 154. 154 if we then take this, boom, 164. I kind of feel okay with that. That is a way to go, at which point you could then just like try and just shove in clusters. For 2 points, this is pretty good. You're getting 5% spell suppression, you're getting 50% evasion, 5% life, and a tiny bit of extra dex, which is actually helpful when it comes to running like certain chesties, which need like 200 plus dex. So that's solid. So now 169 life, pretty good. 159 without that node, you know, not the worst. I kind of like actually coming down here. So you spend 3 travel points, which doesn't feel amazing, but then you get all of thick skin, gives you some chance to avoid ailments, which is interesting if you want to start running chance to avoid being frozen, chance to avoid being whatevered. You get access to entrench for 2 points, which gives you 14% spell suppression, also gives you a little bit of life flask shenanigans. And these spell suppression masteries are all super, super strong. So for 1 point, you know, we could get 90% spell crit, which would be 100% once you get a little bit on gear. You could get 2% extra spell suppression, which is like damage reduction. Either one of those are super strong. Ooh. And you can also, for 3 points, get a bunch of projectile speed proj damage. This is just like a clear thing, but that could be very interesting. We're obviously now over points, and I would have to cut stuff. But, you know, you can kind of get the idea. There's a few, like, things in here which aren't super crucial that we could trim down. And again, considering I play SSF, I wouldn't need 4 jewels, so I would cut jewels down. If you want to do this tree without the 100% stun immunity, that's a very easy way to save points, because you're not getting any damage from here, and obviously a lot of softcore people like points on stuff which not give damage, bad. You could do that, and then you've now got a level 94 tree with 168% life, 4 jewels, pretty respectable. A lot of people consider, you know, cutting stuff like this, cutting out like defensive stuff, going more offensive. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty happy with either one of those trees as an option. I'd have to play the build more to kind of feel like, am I getting stunned a lot? If I wanted like cheap stun avoidance for 3 skill points, I could do that and get partial stun. Another thing I kind of looked into is keeping this routing and then maybe like pain achievement run like petrified blood or something. Which if you're doing that, that makes this routing feel more interesting because you're leveraging pain achievement. To do that, you'd then drop these points. Boom. And you're now back at a level 94 tree. With petrified blood builds, you don't really care that much about not having the most life in the world. You could maybe then think about getting maybe more ES investment and going to like more hybridy, which could be a play. You could chase frenzy charges and run charge traps, so on and so forth. But that should probably give you an idea of what I'm kind of thinking in terms of trees. Obviously, it's something we'd experiment with, kind of fill it in as we go. If you ended up going for the more hybridy route, that's something to look into. One actual final thing I probably should mention, there's also the option of going block. If you commit this way, it's not that much more commitment to then come across to Versatile Combatant. You do like Versatile Combatant plus Deflection plus Testudo, and then maybe like just come on to Golem's Blood. And then suddenly you're messing around with like spell suppression builds with block and maybe spell block. That all seems very, very interesting. It would require very specific gearing though. So I'm not too mad on that. Could be an option to consider for anyone who's doing Scion Exsanguinate Trappers. Because then you could do Gladiator plus Saboteur. And that way you're getting the chance to block attacks, getting the flat block in there, getting the more damage over time. And then, yeah, you could jump to, you know, like you come out of Scion here, grab these good Fizznos, grab Scion Life Wheel, grab this kind of damage or whatever. And then you kind of like come down here and get the block stuff. Something to think about, but anyway. Let me talk about link stuff now. So the links you'd want to run obviously depends a little bit. You 100% are running cluster traps. That's just locked in. It's a fact. You're going to be running cluster traps. You're also going to be running lightning pen. We're a pure lightning build. You want to have a lightning pen. It's something you want to do. Inspiration, I think, is a pretty easy lock in. It's not the most damage in the world, but it gives you a good chunk of damage. It gives you a little bit of extra crit chance, and it lowers your mana costs, which is just a win, 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 win. If you have the blood magic gloves, you don't really care about it as much, but you know, I'm a big fan of inspiration. Okay, so now you've got to think about what is it that you want from a damage point of view. I guess I probably should also throw Ellie Focus in there as an option, but anyway. So if you're planning on doing the critical strike gems, I'd probably go heavy on all the gems with critical, so inspiration, crit strikes, crit damage. And then you can maybe consider running the +3 one. That's also better if you're running something like a lightning spur trap and you're running the crit support gems on that as well, because then you kind of like you double up on your investment, if that makes sense. So that's one way to go. I'm not the biggest fan of trap and mine damage as a link because it nerfs your trap throwing speed, which really, really sucks. I am a big fan of charge traps as a link, because it gives you a bunch of trap throwing speed, and charge traps makes getting frenzy investment stronger. Something to consider. If you went for something kind of like that, you're like boom, frenzies, and then lock that in, and then lock that in, and that. 182. I mean, it could be an option, and then throw in like some stuff like that. Level 98. I mean, obviously this is like pushing the levels a bit. But you know, this is all stuff you can cut and then like add in one more mastery, like your level 100 build. I'd probably end up going for something sort of like that. Infuse is obviously stronger because you get the crit multi from the charge traps, because you get additional crit multi per power charge, so then you'd be getting for 1 point the 15 crit multi and the 40 crit chance. So you'd probably do like that, and then you'd take the crit multi thing. Like that would probably be like your capped out build. If you were to go for that kind of a tree. Possibly, presumably. You don't necessarily need long shot, that's kind of fluffy. You could cut those points there. You could cut that point as well. So that's 4 points cut off. And then if you had a Pierce Helm enchant, or you just had like Pierce on gear, because you can craft Pierce on gear, that's suddenly 3, 6, 7 skill points that you get back. And then with those 7 skill points, you could maybe like do a medium into a jewel, you know, if you had a cluster jewels up you wanted to run. You could alternatively pick up a little bit more spell suppression there, pick up another spell suppression wheel up here. If you really needed spell suppression, you could go for 1 with evil into corrupted blood immunity, or reduce effects of curses or whatever. Can also just be a strong, like, you know, for 4 points you get a whole bunch of chaos res and corrupting blood. Pretty strong if you don't have access to the jewel in SSF. Another thing you could do if you go for the stun routing, is then root out of the side here to then save a whole bunch of skill points. I guess something kind of like that. And then obviously we need to cut a bunch of other excess points. Boom, 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 boom. And now we just cut like 1 more skill point. But you get the idea, right? There's like lots of stuff you could do. You could trim off these points, and then you could keep all of this like nice fluffy stuff if you want to run charge trap kind of memes. And then maybe the way you like up the life a little bit is you go for the yeah, like, you know, you've got a lot of options. But I think the one that I liked the look the most of for the current stuff that I have in SSF was this one. Boom, boom, boom. And I want to try out this knockback thing. I think this is kind of what I'm gunning for, sorry. In which case, yeah, I would definitely run charge traps with all the frenzy charge investment. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then for my last thing, probably just run added lightning. Don't really run trap and mind damage because you lose out on the trap throwing speed. These are good the better your gear is, but I haven't like plugged any gear, and I just put in a pair of it 0 step for the boot enchant. I'd run the boot enchant because I want to simulate my crit chance values. By the time you've got a bunch of like crit chance weapons or weapon plus shield or whatever, then yeah, crit strikes is weaker, so probably not running crit strikes. So it's between crit damage and added lightning. Probably just run added lightning since it's more consistent. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, boom. So yeah, that's probably kind of what you're running for there. That's kind of locked in. You can get reduced mana reservation on shields, which suddenly then opens you up to a couple more options, which could be interesting from an aura point of view. Cheap flex auras that would be interesting for this build. Arctic armor is just a easy way to get freeze immunity if you didn't want to use your Pantheon for whatever reason, or you didn't want to like craft it on gear. You could also go for Tempest Shield if you wanted to get a little bit more spell block, for more spell mitigation. You could run something like a Herald of Ice, which would be like Herald of Ice, but traps can't trigger Herald of Ice. It can't, but it still adds a surprising amount of flat damage, which is often enough to shatter most mobs for map clearing. Having enough cold damage to shatter is very strong. Otherwise, Herald of Thunder is just a little bit of extra flat lightning damage, which is, you know, just more flat lightning damage, which scales all your lightning investment, which is pretty good. Zealotry, if you can fit in enough reduced mana realization stuff that you can run another 50% aura. Maybe if you had the shield plus a helm enchant, or you had like the shield and then the blood magic gloves. You've got a lot of different options there. Is there anything else that we've missed? Oh, we'd probably run Sniper's Mark. The good thing about running Sniper's Mark is you then get the projectile splitting stuff, which could be interesting with the tornado. Assassin's Mark is just consistent damage, which is strong. And consistent damage is good. We don't need the power charge generation, but yeah, probably running either Sniper's Mark or Assassin's Mark, either one. Let's say Sniper's Mark. And then in terms of gearing, it's just a situation of you're going to be wanting, I like daggers over wands because of stat requirements. The good wands require a whole bunch of that's wrong. The good wands require stupidly high int costs, and I just like having consistent crit chance. Go stretch out spells, boom, like, let's just say, like, I don't know, at least tier 3, because again, SSF. If you're doing this in Trade League, just the same thing, but better. And then multi, again, let's just say, like, 30, right? And then spell damage, +1, lightning. And then, yeah, spell damage. Something kind of like that would be like the goal. And then if you can get it with better values, great. If you can get flat lightning damage to spells on there as well, great. But that's sort of kind of what we'd be looking at. Boom. Then you see like, okay, we've now got a crit chance of like 70-ish. We could dual wield, probably running a shield because shields are really, really strong now. Yeah, so then you're like, okay, what sort of shield would we want to run? Either a pure evasion shield or a evasion energy shield. Let's see, what do they give? Chance to spell damage now, 5%. 5% chance to suppress is decent. Which one gives the most evasion? Supreme Spade. See, what do you get on these days? You definitely want life, we know that. Shove like 80 life on there as a minimum. Chance to avoid. You can also look into influence stuff, but again, I'm just looking at like SSF. Alright, so you can get the crit, which is obviously really strong. Get more spell suppression. How much spell suppression do you actually get? 34%. Wow. You can get so much spell suppression on gear. Like, you can get so much spell suppression on gear that you can just, like, cut everything off the tree. Fortunately, the stuff on tree has really good masteries, which is kind of why you'd still want to take it. But that is very much worth considering. Get a bunch of chance to block spell damage would be pretty good. How much avoid ailments do you get these days? 35%. Yeah. It's kind of cool, the fact that you can do these weird, like, block spell suppression setups. It's interesting. Let's just say, for now, it was just like that and that, because again, I'm just trying to get, like, a rough idea of values. So we're looking at, like, 75%-ish crit, which I feel pretty happy with, and that's without any flasks up or any, like, conditional buffs. It's just the build. We get power charges through power charge generation, we get frenzy charges through, we have it on tree, which gives a bunch. If we're running charge traps, it doubles up our charge generation, so we definitely don't ever need to worry about charges. We're not using anything which expels our charges, so that's all chilling. And then you can get a whole bunch of extra, you know, amulets, bunch of crit multi, blah 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 blah. One thing I'm kind of tempted by, since I haven't played it in a really long time, is maybe doing some like sunblast memes, so traps trigger instantly. So to do that, you need to stack reduced trap duration. You can get 80% on sunblast, you can get some on cluster jewels, you can get some on cheap constructions. I would probably, if I was going that route, I would do sunblast plus a 4-point cluster. It's something to think about. But yeah, I don't know, hopefully that was kind of interesting for someone, kind of watching my process. Hopefully you can use this process for any future build you want to play. Basically, get the nodes that give damage, get the nodes that give life, think about getting some defensive masteries, have a couple of different options in the back of my head, and then when I play the build, I kind of feel it out a bit and kind of see which direction I'm going in. But yes, I'm Tarke. Have a wonderful day. Looking forward to actually playing some PoE, since I have been swept off my feet. IRL, that's the expression. But yes, I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Bye-bye.